All right, if you've got a Bible, we'd love for you to open with me to Matthew chapter 19. If you are visiting with us, we have been in this book for all of 2025, walking through and learning from the life and the work of Jesus in Matthew, learning about the good news of the kingdom of heaven. You know, that Jesus came from heaven to invite us to be a part of his kingdom, where we would be doing things God's way and doing things on God's side. It's a different kind of community than the ones of the world that we're used to, with very different priorities, different ways of relating to each other, different values. And though it's not perfect yet, you know, we get to have a glimpse of heaven on earth whenever we live as God's kingdom in the here and now. And so where we are in Matthew is a section where Jesus has really been focusing on what that kingdom community looks like. He's talked about what it really means to be great in the kingdom community. And he's talked about how we handle conflict and forgiveness in the kingdom community. Last week, we saw Jesus just set a very high bar for marriage and for singleness in the kingdom community. And as we turn to Matthew 19, starting in verse 13, we're about to tackle what is going to be by far our shortest section in the book of Matthew all year, but one that is profoundly appropriate in light of what we are celebrating with LCA this morning. And so it says this. It says, "Then little children were brought to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray. But the disciples rebuked them." They tried to turn them away. They said, "Get out of here." Jesus said, "Leave the little children alone and don't try to keep them from coming to me, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." And after placing his hands on them, he went on from there. That's it. It's a quick moment. It's like when you open a new bag of potato chips and it's already half empty. Like, that's it. But I don't want us to be fooled by the shortness of this section. It's really a loaded message here from Jesus about us, about our kids, about our church. A little bit of background. Kids received kind of a mixed treatment in Jesus' time and culture. They were a loved and cherished part of the families that they were a part of. I think sometimes people get this wrong idea that back in the ancient world, people didn't love their kids. And that certainly was not the case in first century Jewish society. They loved their kids. Their kids were an important part of the family. They were brought into the family work very early on. They were an important part of the family's future stability and supporting people down the road. But kids also, society didn't have a real important place for kids. They were important in the family unit, but not necessarily to the society at large. Families, and they didn't revolve everything around the needs of kids or the activities of kids like some families and communities do in our day. The childhood mortality rate in Jesus' day was very high. You know, I mean, we're talking, especially for lower classes, we're talking coin flip odds, 50-50 on if a kid would survive into adulthood. And so these parents, these grandparents, maybe older siblings who were bringing little children to Jesus, it wasn't like they were just trying to, come up with a cute story for the next family reunion. This was not a sit on Santa's lap photo op with Jesus. No, they wanted God's blessing on their kids so that their kids might be a part of the half that didn't die of disease or malnutrition. They were bringing them to Jesus, this teacher with a supernatural gift for healing, and hoping that he might be able to place his hands and really place God's protection on their kids. But then you've got the disciples, and they are trying to shoo these families away. And Matthew doesn't tell us exactly why. My thought is that these families came and they were interrupting a time that the disciples were getting with Jesus. Back at my last church, we had a meteorologist who was at one of the big Indianapolis news stations, and he was a member of our church family. And he was one of those guys who had just been he had been on the air forever, one of those great personalities, and he didn't just do the weather, he got sent to go do the fluff stories and the community events and stuff. And so he wasn't nationally famous, but he was very much a regional celebrity. And one time he and I were grabbing coffee because I was over the discipleship area of our church, and he was involved in teaching Bible classes and stuff. And so he and I were getting coffee together, and we got interrupted 2 or 3 times by people who just kind of came in, butt into our conversation because they wanted to meet him. I remember getting kind of irritated. I didn't rebuke anybody like the disciples, but I feel that I probably felt the way that they felt towards these families, hey, we're doing something important here, and you guys are just butting in. Now, he, on the other hand, he was awesome about it. He treated every person who came up to him like it was just as cool for him to be meeting them as they were acting like it was for them to meet him. Very much like I think Jesus would have treated people. And so Jesus, he scolds his disciples here for missing one of the fundamental things about the kingdom of heaven. That those who seem unimportant to the world are incredibly important to God. I can almost imagine him saying, Matthew, you've been taking notes, right? Just flip back a page or two. Do you remember when I brought that kid into the middle of our group and told all of you that, you can't even enter the kingdom of heaven, let alone become great in it, unless you become like a child. Don't try to keep kids away from me. People like them are who the kingdom is for. In the worldly communities that we're used to, your perceived importance, how important other people view you as being, that often determines your access. Your access to people, your access to opportunities. And it starts early. It starts from when we're picking up teams as a kid. The first ones who get chosen are usually the ones with the talent, the ability that's better than everybody else. And then the next ones that get chosen are the ones who are the most well-connected. They're the best friends of the people doing the choosing. And then last is everybody else, if you even get to be on a team. Your perceived importance determines your access to the game. And it never stops. Every community that we are in, then after that, your perceived importance by whatever the worldly standards are. Maybe it is your wealth or how successful you've been or how talented you are, or maybe it's just being connected and knowing the right people. Those are the ones that they get the doors open to them. But if you're not seen as important by the standards being made by whatever community it is, well, then you don't get to spend time with the movers and the shakers. You don't get the post-worthy experiences. And sadly, the kingdom of heaven is supposed to be different, but many of us bring that same worldly mindset into our relationship with God. And we think that God looks at us, or he values us on the same standards that people do. Now, have you ever wondered, and I know that some of you have because you've told me this, but have you ever wondered if you are bothering God with your prayers? Like man, God, He has more important people. He has more important issues to be dealing with than what I'm talking to Him about. You know, I know that He sent His Son, Jesus, to die on a cross for my sins, but sometimes I wonder if that wasn't because I was just part of a group project. You know, that God was, you know, it wasn't about me specifically. I just happened to be standing in a group full of people that He was going to invite to a party, and it would have been rude not to invite me to. Friends, that's where we so need what Jesus has been trying to teach His disciples. God doesn't value people by worldly standards based on wealth or talent or the important people in their contact list. Like, you have to be humble. You have to be like a child in how dependent you are on God if you're ever going to come to Him and experience His kingdom. So, like, if you're thinking of yourself as too unimportant to have access to Jesus, or if, like the disciples, they were saying that these little kids, you know, they were treating them that way, Jesus would say, unimportant people are my people. Like, my kingdom is for those that the world says are unimportant. Of course you have access. Jesus died on a cross to open the door to eternal life that you could not open to yourself. You had nothing to offer Him. And so you who maybe is sitting here this morning and feeling unimportant to God, if you don't hear anything else, man, God wants you. Now, this next part, I want to go to kind of a practical place with what happened here with Jesus and these kids. Because the truth is that, like, as much as Jesus may want us, sadly, many people have a hard time getting to a place where they want Him. You know, people rely on what the world says makes you important. And so people are so busy either chasing after or just being really happy that they have, you know, a certain amount of savings, or that they've had success in some worldly ways, or that they've got the right connections, that they don't give Jesus much of a time of day. That's how a lot of adults are living their lives. They will not go to a place of childlike dependence on God. And that's why it was such mistaken thinking in Jesus' mind that His disciples would try to keep children away from Him. If a person has to become like a child to accept His grace and to enter the kingdom, then who better than children to be brought to Him? I mean, the thing about children is that they are, by their very nature, quite childlike. You know, kids are the prime candidates for a life-changing encounter with Jesus. So childhood is the ideal time for parents and grandparents and step-parents and godparents and foster parents to bring their kids to meet Jesus. Now, not for the exact reasons that we saw the families doing that in Matthew 19. In Matthew 19, they were bringing their kids to Jesus because they wanted physical protection for their kids, which, of course, is not a bad thing to want. But even more than that, bringing our kids to Jesus is about their spiritual well-being, their eternal well-being, which I wish was as important of an issue to us as their physical health. Now, friends, if you knew that your kid had a disease inside of them, and that the odds of that disease being cured would go drastically down once they became an adult, Like, we would throw social norms and expectations and the world's priorities, we would throw that stuff out the window to get them that cure before they reached adulthood, right? Well, the statistics are somewhere between 80 and 85% of people who will make the choice to follow Jesus in their lives, they will do so before they turn 18. 85%. Most of those being before they turn 14. Which means that in the kingdom community, there should be real urgency about helping our kids know Jesus. And unfortunately, that just isn't always the case because it is so different from what the world says you should be prioritizing for your kids. The world says, no, now is the time to prioritize your children's academic potential. Now is the time to prioritize their athletic or their performance potential. Fill their time to the brim with the hardest classes, the traveling teams. And I am not villainizing school. I am not villainizing sports. But the way some parents let these activities take over their kids' lives, all because the world says that's the way you have to do it. It wrecks me to see that. I mean, this is a pivotal time in their lives to get your kids deeply invested in Jesus and the kingdom, and we have families that are missing it for higher grades, better jump shots. Now, the question that gets thrown out at me, I heard this all the time as a youth minister, was, but what if they miss out on future opportunities because we didn't have them in the highest level of youth competition here, or we didn't have them in the most rigorous academic settings? My heart hurts that we live in a world that makes you feel like you have to choose between those things. Like that you can't find a healthy balance the way that the world designs it. But often, the world is making it really hard to have all of that. And if you have to choose Jesus. And if you're wondering, I mean, well, is that really a choice we have to make? I would just ask you as a family just to do a little bit of introspection and consider the time that your family has for being in the Bible together. I mean, we're all the way back in the book of Deuteronomy. It talks about how like the home and reciting scripture to your children, like that was the primary place for kids to grow up in the faith of following God. So what do we have as a family for time in the Bible together? What do we have in time for worshiping with our church family together and for serving together? You know, all of these ways of training someone up in the ways of the kingdom. What does that look like compared to the amount of time they spend in homework or at practice or at tournaments? And I know, parents, I'm not trying to lay a heavy burden on you. I know that you all are longing to instill the beliefs of the kingdom in your kids and that you're doing that along the way with all of these things. But hear me, it's not just about instilling the beliefs of the kingdom of heaven. It's about instilling the priorities of the kingdom as well. And that is a message for all of us, parent, non-parent, adult, kid, all of us finding the priorities of Jesus and his kingdom, even when it means saying no to the things the world says are more important. Now, friends, there are no guarantees. I wish I could tell you that, oh yeah, if you make sure that your kid is a part of a great youth group and that they come to church and that they're, you guys serve together as a family and do a nightly devotional, I wish I could tell you that would guarantee you to have a kid who is following Jesus into adulthood. I can't. Like everyone is on their own journey as much as we might want to make them be on the path that we want for them. And the good news is, God is not done with you once you're an adult. How many of us could share a story where we were raised in a Christian home, in the faith, and maybe wandered away for a season until Jesus brought us back? Like, it's a great story, and a lot of us can tell it. With that said, like if you are a parent, grandparent, like now is the time for us to be different. Now is not the time for us to do things the world's way. It is the time to be kingdom-minded and to do everything we can now to help our kids know and follow Jesus. And if you don't feel like you have the tools to be that parent or to do that in your home, all the more reason you need to be as connected as you can to a church family so that you are not doing it alone. And church, we better be ready to help them. The last thing that those families striving to get their kids to Jesus need are to run into people like the disciples. People who are like, no, this is kind of disrupting the thing that we were doing with Jesus. And like, okay, church people, especially church people who have been around for a while, like this can start to creep in whenever, we really like to do things a certain way, and kids maybe start to disrupt that a little bit. And we have to be very mindful of not falling into the thinking of the disciples. Now, I am going to brag on our church family for a minute. Sarasota Christian Church has a long history of loving kids and striving to help them meet Jesus. It was one of the foundational principles that this church was started on 52 years ago. Our partnership with LCA, it's a good, recent example of this just being a passion of our church. And I wanted to share with you a few others. We partner with Samaritan Counseling Services. We actually have a couple of counselors who counsel right here on this campus. And one of their primary areas that they see are with kids and teenagers. Every other month, we host a parent night out through our partnership with Bridge a Life. Foster and adoptive parents bring their kids here for some fun and some soul care so that we can give their caregivers also a couple of hours where they can recharge their batteries a little bit. We get to minister alongside so many other great organizations. We get to give educational and spiritual opportunities to rural, impoverished families in Mexico through our partnership with Worldwide Hispanic Outreach. We are helping to keep kids out of human trafficking situations or to be rescued from trafficking situations in our partnership with Love Justice. And y'all, just a little closer to home, when we moved our kids from the building next door back into this building from where they were meeting before, it got a lot more rambunctious around here. So we got kids darting through hallways and running through the worship room after service. And you know what? I just heard positive comment after positive comment about how happy our church was to enjoy having the kids around and having their environment be impacting ours again. We're cool with the fact that while we're doing worship and teaching, we might hear some kids going on. If that bothers you, just know it doesn't bother us. We like hearing the kids. A few weeks ago, when we invited our church to give $5,000 above and beyond to help Coastline Christian Church, who's planting here in town, to help them be able to start with just a fully funded and resourced kids ministry area, church, in just a couple of weeks, y'all gave over $10,000 to help Coastline do that. I love how our church loves kids and wants to see them meet Jesus. My question is, do you? Not just does your church, not just am I riding along on my church's coattails, how are you personally involved with helping kids meet Jesus? Because that should be a value for each of us based on what we see here with Jesus. Some of the ways that you can do that are by serving in our family ministry here at SCC. You know, we right now we have needs in our nursery area for people to volunteer, but we would be happy to have those who are interested in serving anywhere. We're trying to have really healthy rotations right now because, you know, for the summer while we're doing the one service thing, we don't want people to have to be on and serving in kids every week because otherwise then they miss out on worship and have to catch online later. And we want everybody to be kind of rotating that around. And I will tell you, one of our nursery volunteers just so sweetly said to me this week, hey, you know, I would be happy to pick up another shift a month in the nursery. And man, I love her heart in that so much, but I'm staring at 200 people who could pick up a shift in the nursery before she gets another one, right? And so we just want to be serving each other that way. And if serving on a regular rotation with kids, if that sounds like a little much for you, then I would encourage you to come and serve with us for a foster and adoptive parent night out. I got a deal for you. We will give you 2 months worth of serving kids credit for serving one night. And if you're somebody who likes to shop for deals, I've got a better one. Go on a mission trip to Mexico with us, and we will give you a whole year's worth of serving credit for 1 week. Now, I'm kidding about getting credit for this stuff, but you know, I'm not kidding about the need and the opportunity for all of us to find ways to help kids meet Jesus. And now for you, it truly may not be your serving time, but maybe it could be with your generosity. Giving $10,000 to Coastline in just a few weeks, like that is so great. But I would ask, like, do we have regular generosity habits? You know, where we are always trying to just pour in to the families around us, where we don't have to wait for a special ask in order to give. Now, our church, we want to pour resources for ministry into kids and families, but our ability to do that comes at the speed of our church's generosity. And I know some of you are like, well, yeah, but if I give on a regular basis, I'm not moved by the idea of my giving going to something like, you know, the electric bill. I get it, but you know who's using electricity right now? The kids ministry. And the more of us just create a habit of generosity, honestly, the smaller percentage of what's given goes to those those basic needs, and the more of it gets to go to more like spiritual things. And you know, if you really don't feel like you're called to serve on a serving rotation, maybe you're stretched in giving, you've done what you can do to give, we can still all be involved because you can pray. Like, we do not believe prayers just go out into empty space. We believe in a powerful God who is on the other side of those prayers and who is longing for his people to seek him. Church, I covet every prayer that is said for my 3 children and for their walks with Jesus. So maybe if you can't do anything else, what you could do, and you could do it right now, you could pull out your phone and you could just set a weekly reminder that sometime every single week you're going to pray. You're going to pray for the kids who came and were a part of worship last week, or you're going to pray for the kids that you know are going to be there next week. You're going to pray for the parents and the grandparents who are trying to help their kids meet Jesus. You're going to pray for Liberty Christian Academy. You're going to pray for Bridge of Life. You're going to pray. We can and should all be involved. So how are you? Now, I know I threw out just a bunch of different opportunities there, and you know, great way for you to find out more and to get involved with any of those. We've got this great thing, it's called a website. If you've never checked these out, they're awesome. Ours is sarasotacc.org, and you can go there. You can find out more about serving. You can see what there is to be praying over. You can set up giving if you want to make that a habit. And we just want to encourage every one of you to rattle around on there. And if you can't find what you're looking for, well, then give us a call at the church office or come find me or one of our church leaders, and we would be happy to help you. Because Jesus says that the kingdom community values kids. They are in the prime time of life to have a life-changing encounter with Jesus, just like many of us were at that age when we met him.